Hello, in this video I want to look at the ancient quarries of Mons Claudianus in Egypt. Previous upload I forgot to include some relevant parts and I made an error in regards to the Hagia Sophia, so I'd like to add those and correct the error I made. But we see the site of Mons Claudianus and in relation to Karnak, for instance. So then here we see, for instance, the Great Pyramid, famous temple complexes at Karnak. And if we go down further, so get an aerial view, an idea of the temple there itself. Now, I'm assuming this road is follows the old Roman road because, well, across the Roman world, the ancient Roman road builders were very, very good at what they did, and so often the road systems in modern times actually still follow the Roman roads themselves. Pardon, my computer froze, so let's just go through. Now there's a closer view, and there we see the ruins of the town connected to this very important ancient quarry site. I suspect these are Roman ruins. However, the site itself has been pre-dynastic, and dynastic Egypt signatures are all over the place. This was known and probably the source of many of the Egyptian temples. We see some Greek inscriptions as well, because the Ptolemaic Greeks ruled Egypt roughly from the 4th century BC up until the Roman conquest of Egypt. And we see carvings, but also ostracons, so these broken pottery shards. So both in the Greco-Roman world, these were used like paper. So even in elections, they would use ostracon, as they're called, these broken shards, as ballots. To write letters, all sorts of stuff. But the important part about them and these other dedicated inscriptions at Mons Claudianus is that they give us very vital information in regard to what's going there. So surviving Roman records, including the ostracon, detail the daily life of workers at Mons Claudianus, their wages, their daily quotas, as well as privileges, special privileges they had, such as artichokes, oysters, citrons, which are a type of lemon, basically. Also vegetables, herbs, meats that they had in their diets. The workers here were very well treated in comparison to others. So also throughout the area leading away along the Roman roads, we have way stations where the transport of stone, that was basically per day, you're expected to move that much per day. We even have very detailed records, so there are requisition requests for replacement axles for carts, etc. So this is so typically Roman, this bureaucracy, that the empire ran on bureaucracy and record keeping. This is why Rome is so special. Rome inherited their knowledge from previous civilizations, but unlike previous civilizations, they left records which are clearly readable to us now. They're basically our entire civilization that we have now comes from the Roman system, including the organization of armies, bureaucracy, and all these types of things. So unlike Babylonian or Egyptian records, which tend to be more poetic in a sense, they were writing in a different form, Roman and Greek records are very, very clear and understandable for us to read, and that's why they're so vital. Not because they invented, not because they started all of this, but because they show us the connection point between prehistory, unrecorded history, or difficult to interpret history, to the ancient history which we can verify in great detail. So another example is there we see Coptus and Mios Hormos and Berenike there. These are important because these were ancient ports which the Romans used. Again, they did not create these things, they simply inherited them, and that's why it's so important, because they're a beautiful connection point between the poetic records or the non-existence of records. They were much, much closer to the prehistory and the disputed history than what we are now, and that's why they're so vital. That's why we need to look at Greco-Roman records, not because they invented this, but because they recorded this in very clear to read details. But these ancient ports are very important for a number of reasons. For instance, Strabo writes how 120 ships sailed from India, from these ports, around to India. So it shows the scale of trade, again, which was pre-Roman, but because of the records, this is why it's an important feature and should be much more detailed and talked about amongst certain circles, because instead of using speculation, we can use these as evidence example of what was happening before, because they even Greco-Roman, or the Greeks, for instance, attained their knowledge from the Egyptians and from India as well. This is, again, recorded and really not disputed even, but unfortunately remains excluded from certain narratives. Now, excavations at Berenike show how important this particular port was. I'll put the link in the description to Dr. Raoul McLaughlin, who specialises in Roman history and the records, and he details not only the extent of the trade, but how much taxation would have been collected by the Roman authorities. Basically, these couple of ports alone would almost have entirely paid for the Roman legions across the Roman Empire. Huge amounts of goods, but also the taxation. This is very important. There are even very detailed records how local garrisons were ordered to step up patrols to catch people bringing in timber without paying taxation. So the ships being built in these ports needed timber which was imported, and even this would be taxed. And the people, and basically timber smugglers, were going around the toll booths, and there are again these beautiful records, not just detailing the details, but also giving us a picture of Roman bureaucracy and how close it is to our modern times as well. Roman shipping was, their ships were huge. So the Nemi ships, which were found in, I forget the name of the lake, built by, was it Caligula? These were basically luxury boats. So he just sailed around this small little lake, and he had heated water and all these other privileges, very basically a luxury boat to sail around the lake. But they show us, because these exist, so we have written descriptions, but we also have physical evidence of the size and scale of these ships. And of course we can see that such in the massive Egyptian obelisks, which were brought to Rome and Constantinople to show their lifting capability, as well as their transportation capability, which quite frankly made earlier transportation look rather small in comparison. They moved these massive blocks, not just a relatively short distance up the Nile, they moved them up the entire Nile, the entire lower Nile, to across the Mediterranean as well, and then across land, and again dwarfing the distances which are so often highly celebrated as impossible. But again, the written records as well as the physical evidence verifies this. This is not only, it's not speculative history at all, it's actually recordable history, both physical and in the written text. Again, why it makes this so important. But back to Mons Claudianus, and we see several of these column blanks. So the columns for the so many temples, again, across the Roman world and earlier Ptolemaic Greeks, but also the use of column blanks. So the less skilled workers would carve a column blank, and then it would be transported massive distances. It wasn't just a few obelisks, it was huge amounts of stones, column work, transported across the Roman Empire. And because we see the stone from Mons Claudianus across many sites across the Roman Empire. Rome was an empire, its capital was in Rome, but Rome is not, the city of Rome does not exemplify Roman technology and achievements. So again, just get a scale of this blank. So this is over 200 tons, because assuming that in the ancient times it was broken and so it was discarded. Again, Romans left unfinished stone, column blanks, and large stones partially cut or entirely cut but never never moved, which again goes against certain themes which unfortunately certain people keep pushing, even though the evidence is easily accessed and shown to. Now, as an example of this 200-ton column blank, then this actually weighs less than the column of Pompey's pillar in Alexandria in Egypt. It was over 700 kilometers. Now, even just the the journey up the Nile, but not including the journey uphill to get it on top of this hill. And again, this is a larger distance than, for instance, the 2/3 of a mile as seen as Baalbek. But this was not just a horizontal stone placed horizontally. Again, I might add, Baalbek was essentially downhill, not uphill, but this was actually literally, up a much steeper hill, and it had to be lifted into place. So then again, this is the level of difficulty is now added. It's not just slid horizontally, it is lifted into place. And this should be not only included, but I think more celebrated amongst certain groups. But this 200-ton column is not the only one. There are actually many column blanks, but also what we find at Mons Claudianus and so many other Roman quarries is the quarrying technique. You can also see that Aswan in Egypt, these quarry marks and patterns where they show how they were able to cut and remove stone using some very, very simple techniques. Okay, so well, here's a map of known or suspected Roman quarry sites. We also have writings and carvings to show the tools that the stone workers and quarrymen used, and including the pick. So this is one of the Roman quarries verified because of the column blanks, but we see this is in Greece, and we see pick marks. This is very simple tool marks. Trajan's column in Rome itself. Again, on the inside we see these tool marks. Unfortunately, these tool marks are described as mysterious claw marks. They're not claw marks at all, because we see exactly the same types of marks, even the curve in them, because when you're working with a pick, you don't sort of work in a straight line. The way the body works, it sort of moves more in a curve as well. But we see these in Baalbek as well. But of course, these are not just the only examples. We'll also find them in not just Roman quarries, but other quarries. Basically, every quarry in the world pre-mechanization, you will find these marks. When until only a century ago, in the modern world, we didn't have mechanization. The old quarry people had to work by hand to quarry these out. Now, then of course TNT was brought in to blow big holes out, but to work the stone in a more detailed way, not just to blow it up. We see these ancient marks exactly match modern, pre-mechanization quarry marks as well. They're pick marks. That's what they are. They even match the shape of when people do their work. We see point chisel marks, the same. So when you're working with a chisel, you'll tend to go in a straight line. When you're working with a pick, you'll tend to do more of these curved or more erratic things. Again, this is really standard quarry. Even just people who research modern pre-mechanization quarries, exactly the same marks across the world. And also like we see the techniques that they'll use to cut the stone. This again is amongst certain circles is used in different ways, but if you Google for 5 minutes, if you want to put it that way, and look at the detailed study of stoneworking on quarry, there is no shortage of it. It is so accessible, and that's what makes me very suspicious amongst those who say it's impossible and these other things, because, well, you're making definitive statements on stone and quarry marks, yet people take it on good faith that you've done your research. Well, I would say you have not done your research or you're intentionally excluding any contrary information, because it's, well, I must say, not as profitable. And so again, a short study of the so many books, papers, and of ancient quarry techniques will easily show that these types of marks are well known across the ancient world, and again carry through to the more modern pre-mechanical period of stoneworking. It really is very, very easy to check. Okay, let's pause a moment. Okay, so slightly off topic, but still relevant to these alleged claw marks actually being very clearly and repeatedly demonstrated pick quarry marks, is also the continual issue of drilling stones in granite and other hard stones not using advanced technology. However, again, a relatively simple search of ancient quarrying techniques, well actually modern quarrying techniques pre-mechanization, show the use of how stones were granite and other hard stones were drilled using very simple methods, basically a hammer and a chisel. And so okay, I'll put the link in the description as well. This is from a Hindu temple being built in Hawaii, the only granite, it's entirely of granite, and traditional Indian stonemasons were brought from India to Hawaii to create this, a relatively small team. Now they drill through granite using very simple methods as well. So these are traditionally trained stonemasons drilling through granite without the use of advanced machinery. Unfortunately, again, not so, this is not picked up, and even when people do know about it, they tend to ignore it because, well, it's problematic to certain narratives. But this is, not just in the West, but also in the East. This is a traditional stonemason technique. And I think you should refer to stonemasons, especially traditional stonemasons, when you talk about the stone cutting and in regards to ancient times. So this is, they're just carrying on a tradition which is pre-modern, advanced, super high-tech machinery. Not only can they do it, they demonstrate it. The link will be in a description. And they do it in a relatively short time. Again, to a lot of these reconstructions or critiques of them often say, well, it took them a couple of days to do only at a certain level. But, well, things take time. So to put a modern time scale onto ancient technology, I think is really missing the mark. But the link will be in the description. Okay, is my computer going to freeze up? Probably. Okay, so here we see the stone, the hole that was drilled through granite using very simple techniques. Now the immediate response, which is, I think relatively typical but unfortunate, is, oh, but steel, steel, steel. They are using soft steel here, which is comparable to bronze. But also in the recent video I pointed out, not just the alternative, but also the mainstream keep talking about copper using pure modern copper rather than arsenical copper or arsenical bronze, which are important features. This makes a different type of metal with different properties. And so we need to, what tools were the ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Indians, and other people, and in Americas as well, they were using arsenical copper and arsenical bronze, and to compare it with modern copper is off the mark. So this stone was drilled in the 21st century. There is video of them doing it and showing it. So, and you often see experienced, or at least allegedly experienced stonemasons trained in post-mechanized age claiming in these videos that it's impossible to do without modern machinery. No, it's not. Traditional trained masons, rather than ones trained on machinery, can do it and do it and demonstrate it very, very, very clearly. And again, not included amongst those who make definitive statements amongst about stoneworking and lifting, who say it's impossible when it's not impossible. When you should talk to a traditional stonemason, talk to someone who understands the principles of mechanical advantage and lifting technology, and the recorded lifting technology, again left by Romans and Greeks. And it's very clear that they're clearly not knowledgeable on this topic, which they claim to be, or they're intentionally not including relevant information. Now, without a time machine, we can't know exactly how it's done. So I'm not saying that I cannot prove that this was how it was done. But without doubt, I can say that it can be done when they say it is impossible. And that's the issue. We don't know for a lot of these ancient sites exactly how it was done, but it can be done. And to say it's impossible and definitively say that clearly shows you're not across your topic, or you're not including the relevant information, which some unfortunately do. They intentionally include information because they know it's there. So again, too often commentators on lifting and working stone confuse impossible with possible, well-established practices which are recorded, still used by traditional methods. traditional craftsmen, or advanced machinery they confuse with well-known traditional techniques. This is very clear, and if you choose, you can choose to believe in whatever you want, but the facts don't care about your beliefs. You know, the measurable scientific facts, but also the practice of this is still done. So it's not reinventing old stuff and then projecting this on there through traditional techniques as carried on from their fathers to their fathers and to going back through time. So Occam's razor, all things being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best. This is a good thing to work off, but it's not an absolute truth in that aspect. But to rephrase that slightly, all things being equal, the proven solution is always better than unevident speculation claiming there is no solution. So when there is a solution and someone says you that it can't be done, then, well, you've got a problem. Or actually, they've got a problem and you've got a problem if you accept it without challenging this, and especially when you know about it and you still carry on to remain loyal to the team rather than to remain loyal to the pursuit of knowledge and information. I think this is a very, very big problem, and this partisanship is really one of the biggest issues, not just on the mainstream, and that does occur on the mainstream where it's basically heresy to challenge certain ideas, and this is rightfully criticized by alternatives, let's call them, because alternative is a large spectrum. However, the lack to challenge easily provable falsehoods, or the tendency to basically call someone a heretic / shill because they point out these things, is also a big problem amongst the alternative. So whatever side of this supposed, like as if there's teams, which is there are no teams when it comes to truth. There is only the pursuit of truth, and remaining loyal to your team is good on the field, but it's not good in the aspect of study, because you'll never get to the truth. You'll only prove that which you already believe to be true, even when contradictory evidence emerges. So back to Mons Claudianus. So here we see these column blanks, and these column blanks again can be found across the ancient world. And so some more in Mons Claudianus. This is a demolished temple, but along the road from Mons Claudianus we see these abandoned column blanks. Now amongst certain threads and forums, we see it's a very aggressively attacked. This attack is the idea. Oh, but they didn't make. Why didn't they carve finished columns and transport them that way? Skepticism's great, but if it's only in one direction, then it's not really skepticism. It's a dogma, because, well, across the ancient world, not just in Mons Claudianus, but in other places, we see column blanks, because it takes a stone cutter is different to a stone mason or carver. Carving delicate little details is a different skill from simply carving relatively simple shapes. And so one of again, it was, the evidence is just not anyway. So why not move a finished column? Because they have very fine delicate details on them, such as Ionic and Corinthian. If you were to carve them at Mons Claudianus and transport them over 1700 kilometers, you're going to do damage to the stone. It doesn't make sense to do this, and of course this is just considered, well, not considered, because it doesn't fit a certain belief or dogma that goes with this. But Mons Claudianus, where do we see this stone transport? So way down here, these columns in the Pantheon in Rome are single piece columns. They were transported from Mons Claudianus, and the reason they don't have Corinthian capitals on there is because these delicate little features would be almost certainly damaged along the way. This is just one site. So in Diocletian's palace in now Split, Croatia, we see this stone was transported from there as well. The Hagia Sophia also has columns from Mons Claudianus. However, they come via Baalbek. So now I forget the name of the emperor, maybe Justinian, but he relocated columns from Baalbek to the Hagia Sophia. And the Hagia, this is an amazing structure. It's just like the Pantheon, it's hollow. So it doesn't have a massive volume such as a pyramid would, but it's hollow. And to support this structure is the next step in engineering. Now, the pyramids are amazing, not taking anything away from them, the alignments and so forth. However, so you can, in a very simple example, you can pile bricks up and make a pyramid. Piling up stone is very, very different from creating a large open space of stone. This is the next level of engineering. So in volume sense, it's not there, but you try and pile up bricks or blocks and make a hollow building with a dome on top. Now you're talking really advanced engineering. Previous upload of this version was only anyway, but I incorrectly said that the Hagia Sophia, which we see here, has never collapsed the dome. It has collapsed a few times. However, I confused it with the Blue Mosque, which is also in Istanbul, and this is only maybe 5 centuries old, so that it has gone through some severe earthquakes, but it's not as old as the Hagia Sophia. However, it's still an example of this brilliant engineering, which actually, even 5 centuries ago, they were not using advanced technology. Even 3 centuries ago, they were actually using ancient technology. The same ancient technology that had been used since antiquity. It's only really in the last 200 years that advanced technology has got involved, and only really in the last 100 years that really advanced machinery has become involved. So ancient technology has been used until basically to the era of the horse and cart and the steam engine. That's when the advanced technology kicked in. They didn't have diamond drills and all this prior to that. These are all very, very modern technologies. And we shouldn't confuse buildings which are only 5 centuries old, but built on ancient technology, ancient traditions, just because it's or ones of thousands of years old. Here we can follow and see these ancient techniques being reused again. For instance, I mentioned the Pantheon, these columns from Egypt, single piece columns, but this building is basically a sphere on the inside, and the central point, the focal point of a building is not on the ground. So again, these ancient sites, the alignment, the focal point of a building runs along the ground. The Pantheon, which has survived nearly 2,000 years, including, and even Italy is a seismically active area, the focal point of a building is in mid-air, and this is again a fantastic achievement of ancient technology or knowledge, using very, very simple tools, simple survey techniques. However, it is not celebrated. It's essentially unspoken of amongst certain circles because records remain. We know who, we know how, and whenever we know who and how, we dismiss it, and Roman technology gets a bum deal, even though they are much closer to the ancients. They inherited this technology from previous ancient cultures, the Egyptians, and just as the Greeks before them, Babylonians going back through time. So their records, their technology is much closer than unsubstantiated speculation about this type of stuff. So the concept of an alternative orthodoxy is an oxymoron, because there is no, the alternative has no orthodoxy. The mainstream has an orthodoxy. But if you abandon reason, debate, and pursue dogma rather than the pursuit of truth, even when it goes against the gang mentality, that's not really the pursuit of truth. And the inability to challenge patently false, ridiculously false claims is also indicative of a dogma, not really a pursuit of truth seeking. The truth community is not a community. Truth is a pursuit. It is not a community. And this is not about preaching to the choir. What we need to do is challenge not only the people in the middle, but we also need to challenge those who are already convinced of the mainstream view. And we need to do this through diligent work and evidence-based rather than pure speculation. Anyway, have a good